Part 11. As they walked through the desolate city, Mark began to feel a familiar hunger that he couldn't ignore. He knew that he needed human flesh to satisfy his cravings, but he also knew that he couldn't tell Sor about it. She would never understand, and he didn't want to scare her away. Mark tried to ignore the hunger at first, but it grew stronger with each passing day. He started to feel weak and dizzy, and he knew that he couldn't go on much longer without feeding. One night, as they were camping in an abandoned building, Mark snuck out to search for food. He couldn't resist the smell of fresh blood that he detected nearby, and he quickly found a group of survivors huddled together in fear. Mark tried to resist the urge to attack them, but he couldn't control himself. He lunged at one of the survivors, tearing into their flesh with his teeth. The others screamed and tried to fight him off, but he was too strong. After he had fed, Mark returned to the campsite, feeling guilty and ashamed. He knew that he had betrayed Sor's trust, and he didn't know how to make it right. The next day, as they continued their journey, Mark tried to hide the guilt. Part 12. Mark was relieved that Sor didn't suspect him of the attack, but he couldn't shake the guilt he felt. He knew that he had done something terrible, and he didn't know how to make amends for it. As they continued their journey, Mark tried to be more careful. He avoided attacking camps and tried to control his cravings for human flesh. It was difficult, but he knew that he couldn't risk losing Sor's trust again. One day, as they were walking through a forest, they stumbled upon an abandoned campsite. Sor was curious, and she decided to investigate. Mark tried to dissuade her, but she was determined. As they explored the campsite, Sor noticed signs of a struggle. There was blood on the ground, and some of the tents were torn apart. Sor was horrified, but she assumed that it was the work of the undead walkers. Mark felt sick as he looked at the carnage. He knew that he was responsible for the attack, but he couldn't bring himself to tell Sor the truth. He silently vowed to be more careful in the future, and to never let his hunger control him again. As they left the campsite, Sor thanked Mark for keeping her safe. Part 13 of Mark and Sor. As Mark and Sor were walking, they heard a commotion nearby. They cautiously approached and saw a man trying to save Sor from an undead walker. The man didn't notice Mark, who was also approaching from behind. Just as the man was about to kill the undead walker, he suddenly turned and attacked him instead. Mark had lost control and had attacked the man without thinking. Sor was horrified as she watched Mark attack the man. She tried to intervene, but it was too late. The man was already bitten, and there was no saving him. Mark was devastated by what he had done. He didn't want to hurt anyone, but he couldn't control his hunger. Sor tried to comfort him, but he knew that he had to leave. He didn't want to put her in danger again. Mark left the group and went off on his own. He knew that he couldn't be trusted around other people, and he didn't want to risk hurting anyone else. He wandered aimlessly, trying to find a way to control his hunger. Months passed, and Mark had become a solitary figure. He had learned to control his hunger, but he knew that he could never be around other people again. He missed Sor, but he knew that. Part 14. Sor had been searching for Mark since he left, determined to find him and bring him back. She knew that he was struggling with his hunger, but she also knew that he was a good person deep down. One day, she finally found him. He was sitting alone in a deserted alleyway, holding a gun to his head. Sor could see the pain and desperation in his eyes, and she knew that she had to act fast. Mark, put the gun down, Sor said softly, approaching him slowly. You don't have to do this. Mark looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. I can't control it, Sor, he said. I'm a danger to everyone around me. Sor sat down beside him, putting a comforting hand on his shoulder. I know it's hard, Mark, she said. But you're not alone. I'm here for you, and I'll always be here for you. Mark looked at her, his eyes full of gratitude. Thank you, Sor, he said. You're the only one who's ever believed in me. Sor hugged him tightly, knowing that she had found her friend again. She promised to help him control his bad thing. Part 15. Mark and Sor stumbled upon a camp of survivors. The camp was well fortified, and the survivors had formed a tight-knit community. Mark was wary of being around so many people, but he knew that they could provide a safe haven for him and Sor. He approached the camp cautiously, keeping his distance from the survivors. Sor stayed close to him, knowing that he needed her support. The survivors were initially wary of Mark and Sor, but they soon realized that they were not a threat. They welcomed them into the camp and provided them with food and shelter. Mark was grateful for the kindness of the survivors, but he knew that he had to be careful. He didn't want to risk hurting anyone, especially Sor. He kept his distance from the other survivors, staying on the outskirts of the camp. One night, as Sor was sleeping, Mark felt his hunger growing. He knew that he had to find a way to control it, or he would risk hurting Sor. He left the camp and went into the woods, searching for something to feed on. He came across a herd of undead walkers, and he knew that this was his chance. He attacked the walkers, satisfying his hunger without hurting anyone. He returned to the camp, feeling more in control of himself. He knew that he would have to continue to be careful, but he was grateful for the support of the survivors and the love of his friend Sor.